I'll spend a couple of minutes and talk about this amazing new feature added to Insight Maker called Publish Article. The storytelling feature has been a part of Insight Maker for quite some time now, well over a year, I think, and which allows one to, once you've developed a model, the storytelling feature allows you to unfold that model in a way that tells a story for someone else, so that they don't just have to look at the whole model and figure out how to make sense out of it. Now, the benefit is that the storytelling feature allows you to unfold that model in an orderly fashion, though the requirement is that someone has to load Insight Maker and load that model and then step through it in piece by piece or step by step and read the pieces across the bottom. And there's quite a bit of overhead associated with that. The new the new publish article feature allows, which if you're in the edit, if you're not familiar with storytelling, before the end of this video I'll point you to another video that describes the storytelling feature and how to go about developing a story. But in the edit story window, there's a new option down here called publish article. It says other things if you've already published the article. And what publish article does, when you click on it, it takes the description as the abstract for the article, and it takes the whole sequence of commands and turns them into essentially a web page that it stores for you and gives you a URL for it, so that you can then simply share with someone else this URL, which actually loads very quickly because it's just a web page. And as I said, it starts out and it takes the description, and then it unfolds the story step by step. And every time that there's a visibility change or a folder open or close, it generates a new image, and it provides the story as it unfolds and shows the diagrams if you run the simulation model, so one can simply walk through and read the story, as opposed to in the way that one is typically used to reading any kind of a document, as opposed to stepping through the model itself. Now note that it does give access to the model here and also back at the top, so you can explore the model. And there's also a link to the author, which is the Insight Maker profile of the individual that developed it. Now if you go back here and close this, notice this now says in the designer window, it says delete or update, so that it knows that you've created an article for this particular model and story, so that if you open it in the future, edit story, you'll know that there's an article for it. And if you change the model, you can then simply do an update and it will create a new version of the article with the same URL. So anybody that has that bookmarked won't have to change the bookmark. Now there's one alteration that needs to happen in the midst of, if you've already created a number of models with stories, if they do simulations. Previously there was a run model API command that was used to run the simulation. Because the presentation graphics are only generated if there is a visibility change or a folder open or close or a simulation actually run, there is a new step for stories called run simulation, and that step replaces the run model steps that used to be inside of the run action block. And run simulation also has the ability for you to tell it which display you want presented as part of the web page, so that, I mean, it's not unusual to create a simulation model and the display has 4 or 5 different graphs on it. You can use this option to indicate which one of those displays you actually want as part of the article that's generated. This particular model only has one graphic. I mean, if I ran this all by itself without anything, without the story, it generates a graphic, and the configuration says that the title of the graphic is graph display, which is why the graph display shows up here in run simulation. It's the only graph that there is available for this particular model. So you can create the stories, and Scott is currently figuring out how to go ahead and integrate this into the the overall access for Insight Maker, because there ought to be some kind of an indicator here that says this is a model and this is a link to model, and there's also an article for it, and here's a link to the article. But he hasn't quite figured out how he wants to do that integration yet. So the publish article feature simply takes a story that you have defined and turns it into a web page that that you can simply send the URL to someone, and they walk through it and read it just like you had created the article. And one of the other advantages is if you have used graphic images on some of your primitives in the model, because what it creates here are PNG graphics, the images that are referenced someplace else on the web end up being fixed into that graphic, so that if stuff on the web changes, the content of your article won't change. Now, as I said, in the video that you're watching, in the description or notes section, there is a link. There is a link to this particular module of Enabling a Better Tomorrow, which is where there's a link to the video and a link to the article and the model that I just talked about, and a number of additional articles for models that I've developed that I've turned into articles. Within the Enabling a Better Tomorrow context, in the future you will see far more links to articles than models, just because they load extremely quickly, as opposed to having to wait for Insight Maker to load. And then you can read them right in the context. Now, if you're not familiar with Enabling a Better Tomorrow, this publish article, and here is the module on storytelling that has a video about how you develop stories and the API and all of that. This particular thread is actually a part of the Insight Maker segment of Enabling a Better Tomorrow, which is actually a systems learning community, and there's a link to Enabling a Better Tomorrow in the notes section for this video also. So that's an overview of the publish article feature, which I think is just fabulous, and I'll see you in another video shortly. Bye.